Streaming from outside the mainstream, Beyond the Pale, the podcast, hosted by Paleface.
I am eager to speak with today's guest. She is a licensed psychologist, and in her practice, she helps people work through life transitions. Amanda Hannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here, Amanda. So can you share a little bit about your background with my audience, please?
Sure. So as you said, I'm a licensed psychologist, and I've been working for about only like 5 or 6 years now. I completed my PhD at Florida State University back in 2014. And most of my work, so my work now, I'm in private practice, just out in the community. So seeing pretty much anybody that calls and says, hey, I need some help. And then what my start was, though, was working with college students. So I got my start in college counseling centers. That's where I did the bulk of my training while I was getting my PhD. And that's where I also did my internship, which is what's required for us to complete our training and go out into the world and hopefully do some good. So
that's good. So tell me about that experience with the counseling to college students. That sounds like it would be very rewarding and quite challenging, though, at the same time.
It was. I fell in love with that population because there's so much going on. The individual is trying to figure out what they want out of life. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're having more serious kind of soul searching, sometimes for the first time. And so it was a very exciting population in a lot of ways, and feeling like I could help somebody try to feel more comfortable in their own skin, figure out what the heck they want to do with the rest of their life, and if they feel like they can have an impact on the world. So that was really great. It was challenging because that's when a lot of mental health issues first crop up for some people.
Right. Schizophrenia, I think, sets in for males in that time frame. I understand that's unfortunate.
Yes. And then the pressure, the university I worked for just happened to be a very, I want to type this, typically white, middle class or upper class. This was in Virginia. And it wasn't a private university, but it felt like one. So there was a lot of entitlement and a lot of pressure. Right. So it was a pressure cooker for these kids. And so it was very challenging trying to meet the needs and set up realistic expectations of what counseling actually is.
So I know one of the things you help people do is work through life transitions. And I think that that is a life transition. Yes. So what are some of the other life transitions that you help people through? Can you talk more about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I have helped people dealing with job loss, helped people that are just trying to start out looking for a career, maybe outside of just retail or restaurants, kind of when they're making that first leap. I've helped college students figure out a major. What else have I done? I've worked with people who are dealing with relationship changes.
Right. That's a big one.
And divorce kind of seemed to land in my lap when I was first out in private practice a couple of years ago. It became kind of an unofficial specialty area for me because I kept having, and typically women tend to seek help more often than men. So
That's
women
true.
coming in that were going through crises in their relationships and either being told their partner wanted a divorce, or they themselves saying, I gotta get out. So.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine that's a tough one, but I hope that some of those marriages were saved. That's all I can say.
Some of them were. Yeah. Some of them were. But.
Yeah, but you can only but it's great that there's someone there or someone who can counsel people through that time, because I know that's difficult for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. It's extremely difficult.
Right. So one other thing that I was really interested in is your talk about self-worth and self-compassion. That's super important, I think, for people not to beat themselves up.
Yeah.
And to give themselves, I think, grace or understanding. So can you talk about that? What advice do you have for folks to help them be more compassionate with themselves?
What I have people do is I tell people they need to change their self-talk. And that's kind of a lingo that's out there a lot, I think, which is good, that we need to be aware of what we're saying to ourselves, the conversations we're having with ourselves, kind of in our own head. And so I start out by telling people, okay, first you have to develop awareness of the things you're saying to yourself over the course of the day. And a cue to that, typically, because some people are like, what? I'm saying things to myself. A cue that you've said something or had maybe a negative thought is you feel anxious, you feel depressed, you're in a bad mood. And so if you can kind of slow down and ask yourself, what the heck just happened? Sometimes you can backtrack and think, oh, I was just saying, dang, I screwed that up, or I'm not going to land this job, whatever the, context is. Right. And so self-worth is similar. It's a similar process because people are going through life telling themselves things about themselves. They have beliefs about their abilities and how they compare to other people.
Right. I had another guest that talked about self-worth and the difference between that and self-esteem.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And she said that self-worth is something that we just all have. It's innately something we have.
Yeah.
And self-esteem is something that's so connected to so many other things. But how can people learn to connect themselves with that self-worth and to know that it's something that just as humans that we have worth and we have value?
Yeah. Well, to me, there's almost this backwards, I don't know if it's a backwards way to get to it, but I first think about you have to allow for the fact that you are human. Right. You're not superhuman. You're not perfect. You're not supposed to be perfect. Yes, you have flaws, but that can actually be what makes you a unique individual. And that can actually become a strength, if you want to channel it a certain way. And so it's funny because I don't think that necessarily you start out telling a person they need to be a constant cheerleader for themselves or boost kind of that, like almost becoming, what's the word? We use the word like grandiose, but becoming conceited or thinking, too highly of themselves, which is also a reason some people are worried about working on it. They think they're going to suddenly become narcissistic after spending years being self-deprecating. And so I have to have a conversation of that's not going to happen. Promise. I have yet to have that happen. Right. But it is something you have to work at pretty much the rest of your life. I think you have to work at defining for yourself what it means to be worthwhile, what it means to be a human and to have faults, and how you can start to give yourself credit for the things you can do, the things you have done, and to try to see value in that.
Well, I love that advice. That's wonderful. So, Amanda, do you have anything else that you would like to share with my audience before we close out today's show?
Just don't be afraid to seek help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's more common than you think that people come in, and your therapist is not going to be shocked. Your counselor is not going to be shocked. You're not a lost cause. And your problem is big enough. So I have people saying either they're worried things are going to be shocking or that their problems just aren't that big. There's bigger stuff going on in the world. If you feel like you need help, that's a valid reason to seek help. If you feel like you're struggling, that's a valid reason.
Yeah, no one should live with that. They should reach out and seek that help. That's great. I'm hopeful that people will. I know that we often, a lot of times, don't take time for ourselves, and with that, we put ourselves down. We don't give ourselves grace, and then we also don't think that our problems are worth what they should be. Yeah. And so, I don't want my audience to become victims, but I do want them to realize that they need to get help if they need that help. So,
absolutely, and it's not a sign of weakness.
It isn't. So many people, they think it's a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of strength.
Yep,
it's really a sign of strength. So, Amanda, how can folks connect with you? How can they learn more about you?
So they can find me on the web. They can search pretty much Amanda Hannon, psychologist, and that should bring up a few different things. I have a Psychology Today page.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of like a online phone book for counseling, I guess. It gives you the person's image. It gives you a biography. It's a great resource for anyone that feels like they need a little more help finding the right person for them. So it's just a great resource in general. So I'm on that. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Amanda Hannon Counseling. I'm on Facebook because I'm that generation. That's the generation I'm in. I may even have a Twitter, but I'm not very good at keeping up with it. That's a little above my, little above me. And then I've got my own website, and it's just HannonCounseling.com.
Okay, HannonCounseling.com.
Yep.
I urge folks to do that. Look for her on social media. Google her. And then also, I think it is important that people seek and try to find a good match for counseling.
Absolutely.
So I urge people to do that. And I hope that people can look for Amanda, because I believe that she's terrific. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
So Amanda Hannon,
you're pretty great too.
Thanks for saying that. You had to, just because I'm on my show. But never mind. But Amanda Hannon, this has been rewarding. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
If you're interested in being a guest on Beyond a Pale, the podcast, please visit beyondapale.blog/guest.